Hey folks, recently had a kind of a problem trying to figure out whether GPU acceleration was working in transcoding my videos. I happen to use Kdenlive, but when I tried to transcode my videos and I tried to use the GPU acceleration of uh, of Kdenlive, it was just taking just as long as the CPU. So I figured, well, maybe it's not telling me. Maybe it's like compiled wrong. It's just like still using the CPU because it seemed to be using a lot of CPU. And anyway, but things are complicated. Turns out not so much. So I figured I'd tell you guys, like, if you want to figure out whether your video editor is actually using your GPU or not, this is how to do it. So the few prerequisites. I'm going to assume that we're going to want to encode to H.264 because it's what YouTube recommends, and it's widely supported by old NVIDIA. By the way, this is all about NVIDIA. I don't know what you're going to do if you have. In principle, it's the same, but commands will be different for AMD cards. Some super old cards may not support H.264s, and this video will be totally useless for them. But that's probably. I have a really crappy, 7th gen Intel CPU laptop. I mean, it's not crappy. It's quite nice, but it's old. It's probably from 2016 or something, even older. And it does H.264 fine because it has a built-in NVIDIA card. And we're going to make sure we have a copy of FFmpeg that has the NVENC encoders in here. So if I go to a command line and do this, we can see that I have, we don't care about the decoders. We're not decoding anything. We care about the encoders. And what we need is this H.264 NVENC. If you have FFmpeg installed, but you don't see this in your list, you need to get a copy of FFmpeg that's been compiled with NVENC support. And for me, I'm on NixOS, the normal. I think it's like FFmpeg full or something comes with it, and probably on Ubuntu, it's probably there just from normal FFmpeg. But in case not, you just have to do that. I can't tell you how to do that. So the other thing we're going to need is nvtop, which is a nice little graphical thing that shows us the utilization of our graphics card. I think in Ubuntu, it's probably just apt install and nvtop. And I'm on NixOS, so I put in nvtop-NVIDIA in my system packages. And that worked fine. So I have I think it was actually 4 physical cores and like hyper thread, whatever, but it's like, it presents as 8 cores to me. It's an, 7th gen Intel at 2 gigahertz. It's a ThinkPad P51 laptop, and it's got, a lot of RAM, and it's got this pretty low end NVIDIA mobile graphics M1200 card. So that's what I'm working with. And so what we want to do is take a baseline of the system, sort of how fast can we encode things, and is our GPU even working, sort of thing. So I have I'm going to run, I already have nvtop installed, so I'm going to run nvtop here, and you can see that. Why is that going? Oh, wow. Okay. This is going to be, so we can see that. Okay. So, this nvtop thing, is sort of like, top, or htop or whatever for Linux, where you see the processes, but it's mostly concerned with graphic stuff. And in particular, we don't really care about this graph. We don't really care about the amount of memory used, none of that stuff. All we care about is this enc thing right here. And what's happening is that I'm running OBS, and OBS is feeding the NVIDIA encoder our frames that from this broadcast, and it is using 64% of the encoding capability of this device. And so that's pretty good. And that's pretty good. So but that's basically all we have to, the rest of it, sort of this list of processes down here and stuff is useful, but, not all that, it's not critical to know exactly which process is using encoding percentages or anything. It doesn't tell us anything about that down here. So it really is just this encoder thing that we're concerned about. And so I hope this doesn't crash OBS, but I'm going to try to take a sort of longish 4K video and start to encode it with this, something like that. And this command is FFmpeg. We're going to take an input file, MKB, and then we're going to tell it to use the NVENC encoder instead of the software encoder. And then we're going to tell it to encode a variable bit rate, max out at 10 megabits per second. We're going to tell it to scale down to 920 by 1080 because it's 4K. And I want to upload. This is just sort of my normal thing. I recorded 4K and then I downscale it to 1080p to upload it to YouTube. And I want it to be a 30 frames per second. I want to use an AAC track, an audio track. This is just a thing to tell FFmpeg to put a header at the beginning of the file so the video can be played before it's fully downloaded. And there's our output file. So I'm going to run this for a second and I'm just going to stop it, but you'll see sort of what it thinks it wants to do. And I'm going to change the name of the input thing. 2023. Yeah. Get my microphone cord out of the way here, sorry. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to say temp. Something like that. So that's my input file. I'll start it. You can see here, and our encoder bumped up quite a bit here. It's going up to 80%, from 60%. Whatever it's using, still not maxed out. That's pretty good. So in any case, we can see that our speed is about 2.5 times the speed of the video. I'm going to stop that because I've already done it. But by the way, these options, ChatGPT is really good at figuring out these options for you. If you're like, I just need to know how to scale a video. Like I don't want to memorize these things. It really helps. If OBS wasn't running, that command, that FFmpeg command that I used would have topped out at about 4.5 times or 4.2 times the video speed. It probably matters what the input video is like, but since it's 4K, it would probably encode much faster if it was 4K input, but it is not. I'm sorry, it would probably encode much faster if it was 1080p inputted, but it is 4K, so the input probably matters is about the file size and speed. In my case, when I'm not running OBS, it tops out around 40%. The enc bit there, up here, it's probably this bit. It tops out around 40%, and the FFmpeg process taking like five whole cores, something like that. And I think the reason that it's only using 40%, it's not maxed out. Like it's not maxed out right now, and we're recording. I'm recording 4K. Is because FFmpeg just can't feed the codec, the NVIDIA hardware encoder, fast enough to top it out during re-encoding. So, it's got to send frames so fast it just can't do that. So it might go, this encoding percentage might go higher if we ask for like higher quality, or might go higher if we have faster CPU that push frames into the encoder faster. But on my system, tops out around 40%. And encode that whole file, which is about 30-minute long 4K video. It takes 7 minutes, 10 seconds. So if I change that command line from what I just put in there and change the c.cv from H.264 NVENC to libx264. Run again. What did I do? Rate control. Okay, I don't care. I do that. Then we can see that the encoder's background, is a little unintuitive. Usually it's 0 because I'm not recording in OBS, but this command is not using the NVIDIA encoder. It's using just CPU rendering. and it's around, it seems about around the same speed as our old one, but in reality, when I'm not running OBS, it is about half as fast as the encoding. It takes, yeah, it takes about 13 minutes to do that whole file. And actually, the file size, the resulting file size, is about half as big. So, you know, the NVENC encoder, the quality to me is indistinguishable, but you know, your mileage may vary. I don't know. I have old eyes, so. So anyway, that's how you can tell if something is using the GPU to do something. It's that ENC percentage in nvtop. So in Kdenlive, it's much the same thing. Just go in Kdenlive, and I have this thing here. My project settings are to render out at 1080p, 30 frames per second, whatever it is. And my input is 4K here, this thing. Clip properties, 4K. So it's transcoding. And if I go to render, there is a, you have to actually go download this particular one, but it's not much different than the one that either of these are here. But if you go to this little download tab, you can download this new renderer preset thing that tries to match up what YouTube wants for it. And it's basically more or less what we did with FFmpeg. I think it's got slightly higher audio quality. But in reality, I don't think it's that much different. And also here, I just, sort of bumped up the number of encoder threads, which I'm not even sure what those are, as opposed to this parallel processing threads. I don't know. But it seems to make no difference. If I turn off parallel processing, it's much slower, no matter what I do, whether I use GPU rendering or CPU rendering. But anyway, so if I do this render to file, let's see, cancel. If I say temp 2, something like that, temp 3, temp 2, render to file. Let's see the other. Yeah, so we can see the encoder number climbing here. And I imagine that's about where it's going to wind up. Okay, so maybe it's get up a little bit higher. Maybe 85%, something like that. So if you notice this encoding number changing when you're in your video editor and when you're rendering a file, it means that you're using your GPU. And in this case, this particular preset renders at about, what is it? What did I say it was? Yeah, our hardware supported FFmpeg transcode took about 7 minutes, and this takes about 17 minutes or something like that. So, I mean, it's not all that, makes sense because Kdenlive's got to take a bunch of other stuff into account. It has to maybe have more than one input stream and effects and stuff. So it can't feed the encoder quite as fast. But yeah, anyway, it takes about 17 minutes. So if I instead, if I stop encoding this way, 43 FPS or whatever. If I stop encoding this way, close this, and instead I go to render at using not that, but this, sort of the generic CPU based one, keeping everything else the same. We get something, when I'm not using OBS anyway, it takes just slightly longer than the hardware accelerated one, which is why I made this video, because I didn't understand why that was happening. So these numbers are a bit of a lie. We saw about 40 FPS before. Okay, well, it's getting up there. So that's about, like between like the hardware accelerated one in Kdenlive when OBS isn't running is like 52 frames, and the other one is, the non-accelerated one is 50. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna stop this again, and we could tell. Well, I didn't show it, but over in the NVENC thing here, when we ran the CPU based one, we wouldn't have seen this number increase, and we don't. So it turns out on my system, although the GPU is indeed used during rendering when I asked for it in Kdenlive, it's not much faster, and file size is actually slightly smaller on the Kdenlive than using the generic renderer, but they're both much bigger than FFmpeg. So anyway, I guess I'll use the GPU encoder, and maybe if I upgrade my computer, it would actually make a difference because it could feed it frames faster. Or if I used a 1080p input source, it might feed frames faster. But in any case, at least I know it's working. But it's not helping. It's just working. So if you need to figure it out too, that's how you do it. Thanks for watching.